Now, up next, we have the keynote address presented by a Mr. Isaac Nkama. Isaac is this is a very qualified person. So brace yourselves. Get ready to feel uneducated. This is a gentleman who is a formerly qualified professional futurist and foresight strategist. He was born in Zambia. Isaac has a postgraduate diploma and master's degree, both in futures studies. In addition, he has an MBA, an MSc, and fourth master's degree, which is MSc in real estate. He is also a chartered marketer. I'm not done. He is on the board of the African Futures Council. He is an expert in analyzing how various components of the future might unfold and uses these possible outcomes to empower organizations and leaders with valuable and important global, continental, and local insights. Please welcome onto stage Ndate Isaac Nkama.
Thank you so much, Lois. So you are very deeply talented, and what's unique about it is that it comes out so naturally. Also, thank you to all the participants. Congratulations to you for making it up to this far. And ladies and gentlemen, I feel both humbled and privileged to be speaking to you today. I think the first place to start off with whenever one speaks about futures is to start speaking just a brief background on what futures is, because it's really a very new field that very few people know very little about. The first people ever to qualify in future studies in the world were only in 1979. In the US. And it came out from what transpired in the Second World War, with the generals of the US Army being rather puzzled that they were unable to anticipate the attack by the Japanese on Pearl Harbor. And it was basically trying to decipher, how did we miss this? And they began using it informally. But it was not until 1979 when it was put structurally into a program, and the University of Houston was the first one to offer it. And because of that, there are less than 50 universities in the world that offer this program, which produces professional futurists or foresight strategists. That is, those who have formally studied the field and its methodologies. Unfortunately for us, there's only one university of those less than 50 in the world that offered formally, that is in Africa, and that is Stellenbosch Business School. It's a multidisciplinary field, and it's both a science and an art. So you have to have a love for reading from philosophy to the sciences, from technology to medicine, because all these things are interconnected. You can't like one and not like the other. I'm often asked if scenario planning is another name for this profession. And the answer is no, it is not. In future studies, you use various methodologies. And I've just put up some of them. Those are just some of them. And as you can see, I've highlighted it there at number 10. Scenario planning is not another name for this field. Scenario planning is only a part of this field. It's just one of the methodologies. So I'm not sure how the confusion came about that people in this field are called scenario planning, but it is just one of the methodologies. Let's start off with just a general outlook. And there's quite a bit to cover, so you will excuse me if I move a little bit fast. I normally try to explain things in detail, but there are certain areas where I will go into a little bit of an emphasis. So if I do go a little bit fast. Please excuse me, it's because I'm trying to cover as much as possible and so that I don't leave anything out. One of the biggest problems that the world will continue facing is inequality. We have at the moment 1% of the world's population owning 50% of the wealth. That is going to create social problems in the future. Because of that and other variables, the increase of radicalism, the increase of nationalism, and a variety of other factors, there will be more wars inside countries than in between countries. And again, that symbolizes civil strife. That's a great departure from the past, where wars were often between countries. And now we are going to have more wars inside countries than in between countries. The world becomes co-governed by governments, but also by business. Business is becoming very, very powerful. And in many instances, business is becoming more powerful than governments. Just to give you an example, of the world's 100 largest economies, the top 100 economies in the world, more than half are not countries, but are corporations. And that trend will continue. It never used to be like that. The largest economies were always countries. A lot of bad has come from COVID, but a lot of good has come. One of the things that has happened is that multilateralism has strengthened because countries have recognized that resolving your own problems does not help you if your neighbor's problems are not resolved. And if there's any lesson that we needed, it is COVID. And so that has been very good for the strengthening of multilateral organizations. One topical issue that people talk about is China is challenging America in terms of power. And I'm often asked, is it true? And my answer is always a very simple one. Yes and no. And I want to repeat the and no. You see, when we contextualize power in that context, power is divided into two. You have the hard power. Hard power is your economy, your military strength, your scientific advancement, your infrastructural development, all those tangibles. That is what you call hard power. The soft power, and in terms of hard power, for sure China is challenging America, without doubt. Soft power is the extent to which people adopt your ways. When children watch cartoons, it's American. When children go to movies, it's American. When they listen to music, it's American. Habits, traits, it's American. When they ask for takeaway foods, whether it's Burger King or McDonald's or whatever, soft drinks, it's American. In that power, the power of the United States is unmatched by any other country, and no other country comes anywhere close to matching the soft power of the United States. And what has been significant about American power is that America is the only power that has been powerful and dominant in the world in both hard power and soft power. China is growing in hard power, but not in soft power. And so when we say China is challenging America in terms of power, we need to qualify that. We don't usually do. But why is China doing so well in terms of hard power? We'll get to that in a little bit. But before we get that, while on China, let's talk about Chinese relations with Africa and what we see for the future. The relationships are increasingly being perceived to be one-sided. And that is because when China came into the continent, one of the things that African countries liked is the fact that Chinese investors and Chinese government didn't care about whether you had prisoners of war or whether you had political prisoners. They just wanted their resource. If they came into your country and they were looking for copper, that's all they looked for. They didn't care whether you had human rights, whether you were democratic or not. And many African countries were attracted to that. Someone who comes in to invest and doesn't meddle in it. And so it became very easy. And especially for those regimes that were authoritarian, an investor like China was very good. The problem is, they were so welcome that in the end, African countries became very deeply indebted to China. And that created problems. And already there are underlying sentiments, resentment with African countries beginning to feel these people have taken a lot more than they have given. And that is beginning to build a lot of resentment. It's not yet out there, but expected to come. And so the relations will start cracking. That presents an opportunity for US and Europe to reassert themselves in Africa. The US has just come out of a foreign policy dilemma under Mr. Donald Trump, who was not very Africa-friendly, and basically their foreign policy did not do too well under Donald Trump. You all know that, so I will not even go into it. So it creates an opportunity for the US and Europe to reassert their influence. And it is good for Africa in the sense that you are now going to have the US, China, and Europe all competing for Africa's attention. That means in terms of trade, aid, and all kinds of bilateral commercial relations, the terms and conditions will be much better for Africa because each of these are going to be trying to be outdoing the other. And Africa will be like that princess who has these three princes, China, the United States, and Europe, who are all clamoring for her attention. Now, we live in an era of innovation. An abundance of natural resources will never, ever guarantee you wealth. But so too does a lack of resources does not mean that it will lead you to poverty. And Japan is one such country. Japan was built on innovation. Innovation will create more value than resources. And if you have any doubt, you look at the top 100 companies. If you look at the composition of the top 100 companies, they all have one thing in common. Increasingly, those companies that are based on innovation and technology are continuing to grow, to dominate. Google, Samsung, Telsa, Yahoo, Amazon, not necessarily in that order, but they are beginning to take the upper tiers of the top 100 companies. And those that are resource-based are going lower and lower. Now, how do we measure innovation? Because that's very important. Because in tomorrow's world, innovation is going to be a lot more important than resources, and I will show you why. But how do we measure innovation? How do we measure whether a society is going to be innovative, or how innovative a society is going to be? One of the easiest ways and one of the most logical ways is we take the number of graduates that we produce each year, and amongst those, we then calculate the percentage of those that come from the science, technology, and engineering and mathematics. And each one of those sectors in their broader senses. So when we look at engineering, when we look at technology, mathematics, science, we are including medicine. So each one of those is in its very broad senses. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The higher the percentage that you have of people from those fields, the better for your innovation. And why innovation is so important is because there is a relationship between the amount of innovation that you do and the amount of economic growth, especially for tomorrow's economy. Now, in Europe, 14% of their graduates come from the STEM environment. In the United States, it's 17%, obviously both coming from a high rate and a high base, historically. India is 32%. China is 40%. I want to pause here for a minute because I can read the body language. You are all saying, what about Africa? I feel reluctant to share with you that some parts of Africa are as low as 3%. Now, and this is there are two warnings I have tonight. This is one of them, warnings to leaders. I liken that to a chef's economy. And that is a term that I deliberately gave it. And why a chef's economy? I want you to imagine, ladies and gentlemen, just for a while, a society where we train a lot of chefs, well-qualified chefs who can prepare the best recipes. And we train loads of them. But somewhere along the line, we forgot that these chefs need to have something to cook. We need to have people that grow the food, that manufacture the fertilizer, the insecticide, the pesticides, the spices, all along the value chain. And the question is, if we are training all these chefs, but we are not training anyone who's going to grow the food that the chefs are going to prepare, what are these chefs going to cook? Likewise, if we are training all these administrators that we are on the continent, skills that are based on administration, highly qualified, highly skilled administrators, but we are not producing the skills that are going to contribute to the growth of those economies, all of these highly trained administrators, what are they going to administer? Hence the chef's analogy. This point is so important because if we don't rectify this, this will affect the future of Africa's economy in the future in a very negative way. Because the economy of the future is going to be based on innovation. Those who innovate are those who produce the skills to innovate. We are producing more graduates each year than we did the previous year. Yes, we are. But we are not producing the right skills. Now, there is no useless skill. There is nothing like a useless skill. It doesn't exist because every skill has its use. But there is certainly a problem in producing a lot more of the skills that you already have an oversupply of, and literally not producing anything of the skills that you need the most for tomorrow. Now, that is a problem, but how do we rectify it? There are three things we can do. One is to introduce STEM salary bands in the educational system, to encourage more teachers into that field. And you may say it's unfair. No, it's not unfair. You look at the organogram of any company, look at directors, they're all equal on the organogram. Do they get the same? They don't. The second is to link the scholarship institutions of governance, the NESFAS related, and here I must stress that I'm not speaking about any specific country, but the continent as a whole. And so link the issuance of scholarships to the national need of those particular professions, so that you will have certain bursaries, certain skills that get 100% bursary. Some get 90%, 80%, and so on, depending on its usefulness to the economy at that particular time. If we had more time, I was going to share something that I've done along this route. But I'm sure you get what I'm talking about. And the third is to elevate the entrance criteria in teacher training colleges. Throughout the continent, every time there's a problem in the educational system, what do people look for? They change the curriculum. And then something goes wrong, then they change the curriculum. But you can have the best curriculum if you don't have the teachers to teach those curriculums, then it's as good as your efforts are as good as nothing. So we need a good curriculum. But likewise, we need good teachers. And so if we elevate the entrance criteria into teacher training colleges, we elevate the standard of teachers. And if we do that, we automatically elevate what we produce from those teachers. Because fixing the chef's economy is not going to happen on its own. We have got to intervene. We can't just wish that we produce more STEM subjects and then it will happen. We have to intervene. And these are amongst the interventions, these are some of the... Now, and I want you to remember, sir, with your very important paper, Business Day, that the chef's economy is going to be a very, very, very serious thing for the continent as a whole. Now, we've just come from a very difficult situation with Corona, and it's changed some things, many sectors. We don't have time to get into all of them. But one of the sectors that has changed is retail. And I'm touching on retail specifically because you all deal with retail. But before we touch on retail, on some of the trends and developments in retail, let's look at the sizes of retail. So, in other words, in any particular country, how many square meters of retail does that country have? All the shopping malls, the centers put together. So the US is number one. Those are the top 5. Sir, can I ask you to take a guess as to which country is number 6 in the world? Sorry? Can we give him a round of applause, please? Yes, South Africa is number 6. Many people don't know that there are only 5 countries in the entire world that have more shopping centers than South Africa. And it has a history. And those are the rest of the top 10. By the way, of those at 24 million square meters in South Africa, almost half, Gauteng, 11 million is in this province alone. 3.5 million is in the Western Cape, 3.3 is in KZN. Those 3 provinces put together make up 75% of the total retail space of South Africa. Now, because of all the factors that you know, reduced demand for retail space is going to lead to lower rentals, and newly built malls in the future are going to be smaller, much smaller. And then some of the regional malls are going to have conversions. So imagine a place like Eastgate, and some of these will be converted into what I call live, work, shop, leisure developments. So you have a place like Eastgate where it's been reconverted. You have a part that is apartments, a part that is offices, a part that is leisure, and a part that is retail. So your entire life is there. And that will introduce a new lifestyle. And this new lifestyle will be really highly sought after by young professionals and middle-aged professionals. And essentially, COVID has been to the retail sector what 9/11 was to aviation. Now, if you look at the SMEs and corporations, SMEs, generally speaking, are closer to the customer. And because they are closer to the customer, they are more responsive. I'll show you a video in a short while that will show you that. And they will continue to increase their rate of innovation. And the relationship going forward between SMEs and corporations is that increasingly, SMEs are going to be the initiators of innovation, and large corporations will be the perfecters. If you look at, for instance, the hand sanitizer dispensers that you find everywhere, that was from the SMEs, again, because of being closer. And the duty of corporations is to just perfect them and produce them en masse. The slower processes of the larger corporations sometimes tend to deter innovation, and also the legalities. Please Call Me is one example. So if Please Call Me had been an SME that was selling its concept to a large corporation, there wouldn't have been that court case. So large corporations need to refine their processes, their internal processes, if they are to increase innovation. Because often what large corporations do is they hire talented people into the corporation, and they feel that that is going to help them innovate. But you can bring the best talents into the corporation. If the climate, the environment, the legalities do not allow for that innovation to thrive and to prosper, it doesn't matter how much talent you bring in, it's useless. And also the relationship is going to be more of, usually large corporations were buying the smaller corporations. But in this instance, in the future, you're going to see a lot of smaller corporations saying, no, we don't want to be bought over. Let's have a strategic relationship. You bring us your challenges and we'll find your solutions. And increasingly, that's going to be the type of relationship. I was asked to make sure that I include this, probably just to motivate some of you entrepreneurs. Private jets are going to have competition from a very unlikely source, from the commercial aircrafts. And how can a commercial aircraft be competition for a private jet? Really? But yes, it's true. We have at the moment 3 classes of aircrafts, and those are obviously first class, business, and economy. But you are now already having private cabins. 3 airlines have already got this now. This is started. Whereby within the airline, within the aircraft, you have those people that want to fly in a private cabin. And so you will not find the necessity for private jets in certain routes. And you have these private cabins, that's the section there. You have these private, this is a family apartment. That's got a lounge, it's got a kitchenette, it's got everything. So this is the new way of traveling. And I just thought I should add that. By the way, to some of the entrepreneurs here, I'm sure that in the next 2 years, at least half of you will be flying private cabins. So. Now, we have 4IR, which has been touted very well and so on. But this is the second warning that I'm giving. I have 2 warnings. The first one was the chef's economy, and this is the second warning. There is a danger that we may distort the meaning of innovation through how we implement 4IR. Because we need to avoid digitizing and being technology-centric in how we view and implement 4IR. Because not all innovations are based on, digitization. And before I go to the next point, I'm going to show you something here. Now, you will all agree with me on 2 things. Firstly, that had nothing to do with digitization or technology. But secondly, you all agree that that was extremely innovative. That's in Kibera, in a shanty town outside of Nairobi. So our interpretations of innovation as Africa needs to be both practical and realistic. It must be a blend of ideas that contribute to world solutions, but also contribute to our own problems, because we have unique problems. Africa must define its own interpretation of innovation. Because if we try to implement the innovation of others that fits into their environments to fit it into ours, we will get it wrong, and we will say that there is something wrong with 4IR. So if there's one warning that I would like to give is that leaders must ensure that 4IR is implemented in a manner that does not leave certain sections of our society behind. 4IR must not be turned into an elitist issue, because innovation is not only for the elite. I would like to end by talking about the prickly pear. The prickly pear is a very delicious fruit, and we don't have it all the time. But what's inside it is very delicious. The future is very desirable. The prickly pear has many thorns in it that lead us to the delicacy that is on the inside. The future has many good prospects for us. But when we pick the prickly pear, we pick it with care and with a lot of tact because we don't want to be pricked. Because of the complexities of the future, where the world is becoming extremely complex, when we do our planning for the future, we need to plan extremely carefully, very, very carefully, meticulously, and leaving nothing to chance. If we are as careful with how we approach the future as we are with how we pick the prickly pear, then we will all arrive at the delicacy that the future can be for each one of you and your respective companies. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply honored to have spoken to you today.
Thank you very much, sir. That was fascinating.